Hi, good afternoon. This is Jody Patterson. I'm the Client Care Manager for Oasis Solutions. I will be facilitating today's webinar, which is on Sage 100 tips and tricks, and we are going to be covering the inventory management module. Presentation is going to be performed by Pam Scott, our Director of Client Services. We will be taking questions during the presentation. Your lines are muted, so we do ask that you enter your questions into the questions window in the GoToMeeting session. If you have any trouble finding that and also just want to chat me directly, I will be monitoring the questions and during the presentation. Occasionally Pam will pause and ask if there are any questions on that particular section before we move on, and I will be reading those out to Pam as we go along. At the end of the webinar today, you will receive an survey by email, and we do appreciate any feedback that you have on these webinars. These are designed to facilitate your use of Sage 100 in a free format, not to substitute actual training, which we can really do much better in a training environment in our office or on site with you. But we do want to make these valuable to you, so please give us your feedback on how we can improve the tips and tricks webinars or topics that you would like to see in future webinars. That would be great. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Pam. Pam?
Thank you, Jody. And I will start by letting everyone know that inventory is a huge topic. So, and typically generates a lot of questions. We may not be able to get to all of the questions today, or some of the questions, if it's going to be a lengthy answer, we will table those, but we will follow up with you after the webinar to provide you with the answers. So if it's something, just bear with us if we tell you that we'll have to get back with you on a particular subject so that we can cover as much as we can in the hour that we have today. So as I mentioned, today we're going to talk about inventory management, and we're going to focus on a few different things in inventory today, and then also talk about how inventory integrates with the sales order and purchase order modules within Sage as well. So the first thing that we're going to do in inventory management is we're going to go to the setup, and we're going to go into the inventory management options. And I just want to point out a couple of things to you in the system. Sage 100 now allows you, or excuse me, let me step back a second. Sage allows you to have multiple warehouses within the system. You've always been able to do that, where you can have multiple warehouses that are, possibly different warehouses or locations you have around the country, where you can track items per warehouse and then have the quantities within that warehouse. Another way that I see clients use multiple warehouses, let's say that maybe you do a lot of service work or repair work, and you have technicians on call that have parts on their truck, and they go out to someone's home or to someone's business to make repairs or service some equipment. Those individual trucks could also be set up as a warehouse so that you can track what has been sold or used off of that truck and know what items need to be replenished on that truck as well. So you do have the ability to require multiple warehouses, and if that's checked, then you can set up those various warehouses. On the right side, you have Enable Warranty Tracking. And if you do sell items that do have warranties, you can say that you want to track the warranties. I'll show you in another area where you actually set up warranty codes, and then those codes can be assigned to individual inventory items. And then you have the ability to write reports and pull data based upon the warranty information. The other thing that I wanted to show you on this particular screen is the integration. And obviously you can integrate your inventory with the general ledger. And also, if you're using the job cost module, you can also integrate that with inventory. If you notice, the sales order and purchase order modules are not listed here, and that's because the integration with inventory is listed in the setup options separately in the sales order module and in the purchase order module. So that's where that integration is turned on. On the additional tab, I wanted to show you this item audit information. And when you're setting up Sage from scratch, or you set up a new company, it basically is going to default to not tracking item changes. But I would suggest that you look at your options, and if you're not tracking changes, that you set this to all, and that you track additions to your inventory in detail. What this audit report does is, if you were tracking the changes to your inventory management, you can go and under your reports and run an audit report, and it is going to let you know if anytime an inventory item is added. It's going to let you know anytime an inventory item is changed, maybe from the standpoint of you've changed the valuation method, you've changed the description. If you delete an inventory item out of your system, it will also track all of that information. So basically, any changes that are made, if you're telling it to track it, it will track it on a report. And typically, those audit reports within Sage will let you know the date of the change. It will let you know the user ID that made the change, and it will let you know what the change was. Works very similar to all of the other audit reports that are in the various modules throughout your Sage 100. So just wanted to briefly show you the inventory management options. That they're pretty basic. Where you really get into the major setup is when you're setting up not the options itself, but when you get into the maintenance, especially like your product line maintenance. So we're going to go ahead and close out of the inventory management options. And yes, I want to save changes. And actually, the next thing we're going to talk about is the product line maintenance. The product line maintenance, every inventory item that you have must be assigned to a product line. Now, you may have a very basic inventory system, and you really only have one product line, which is fine, or you could have multiple product lines. But this is where you're setting up and establishing if this product type is a finished good, if it's a raw material, if it's discontinued, if it's a kit, the valuation method. Again, and this is something that you really want to think about if you're making any changes or if you're just setting up inventory from scratch, is what you want that valuation method to be, and understanding, number one, how the general valuation works, whether you're using something like LIFO or FIFO, and then also understanding how that works and the hierarchy within Sage 100. You can put in an inventory cycle if you want. You can allow discounts. You can say if an item has become inactive. You can determine if you're calculating commission on a particular item. So if you have salespeople and the commissions may be different based upon the type of product they sell, you can establish that as well. You're going to establish whether or not this item is taxable when you sell it. And then also you can set up units of measure. So that would be, you have your standard unit of measure, your purchase, and your sales. So you may purchase something by the case, and there's 48 of each item in the case, but maybe you sell it by the each. So you can set up those unit of measure conversions as well based on your items. You can say whether or not you allow returns of that item, and if there's if you have a restocking charge, and what that restocking charge method is, whether it's fixed, it's a percentage of the item cost or item price, or if you have no restocking charge at all, and then you can set up what that rate is. And all of this information can be different on a product by product line basis. So the other part of setting up a product line is the accounts tab within the product line. And it is going to list all of these various accounts that could be impacted GL-wise based on your transactions, and then it's going to have you fill in the GL account numbers. So a lot of times individuals may not be certain about how these accounts are going to be affected, and if you have very detailed questions, I would suggest that you give our staff a call, and we can help you with those. Another thing that you can do for maybe a very quick reference is actually use the help screens from within Sage 100. So if I'm on the Accounts tab and I click the green question mark, this is going to take me to Help. And it's going to take me into the product line maintenance. And if I scroll down, I'm actually going to see each tab in product line maintenance, and as well as each item. So on the accounts, if I click on let's say the cost of goods sold for the account number, it's actually going to give me a brief description. And it's also going to let me know basically what happens to that on from the GL standpoint. So for the cost of goods sold, it's showing me that this account is going to be debited when items are sold or issued from inventory. So this will give you a quick kind of a reference if you're unsure what causes a posting to that account number related to inventory and what that posting is going to look like. So again, all I did was, let me change the screen here, is from the screen within Sage, I clicked on the green question mark. And just to let everyone know, most any screen that you happen to be in, any area within Sage, you're going to notice that green question mark, and if you click on the help, it is going to take you to the help section related to the current screen that you're looking to. So don't ever hesitate to use that as a reference. Usually, most of the time, it may answer your question. So just wanted to point that out as well. So you can have multiple product lines. As you can see in my demo data, we have several different product lines listed here. And we'll talk in a minute about the various the valuation methods of the product lines. And that's also something that I mentioned, that you really want to make sure that you're thinking about how you want to track your valuation method as you're setting up your inventory. And there are instances where we will have clients that will call and they're wanting to change their valuation method. So if you do want to do that, you know, there are things that you need to take into consideration when making a change such as that, and our team will help you walk through the process. I'm sorry. So, and then this valuation method, when I set up an inventory item, if I give it the product line of DC, it's going to then give it that serialized valuation method. So, are there any questions on product line maintenance?
I don't see any questions on product line maintenance. In particular, but there is a question, I'm not sure what it's regarding. When you track changes, where can you see report of the changes?
Okay, I think they're probably talking about the audit report in that section in the setup options. So let me close the screen. And where you're going to go is in inventory management, you're going to go to reports, and you have your item audit report. Now, if I run the report right now, because my settings were set to never track it, it was set to none, I won't have anything in that report, but you do go into this item report. You can run it for everything, or you could just run it on a particular item. You could run it on a particular user, or you could run it for transaction dates. An example might be, let's say that you have 2 or 3 individuals that are responsible for setting up product lines and inventory items. And you keep running into an issue where the wrong product lines are assigned to the items. And you're trying to narrow down, who is not setting these up properly. You can actually run this report based on a user login, their user code, and you can see all of the changes that that particular user made. Now, obviously, if your users know other people's logons and passwords, or they share a logon, you're not going to be able to determine who made that change. But this is where you will go. And you can tell it how to sort the report. You can sort it by item code or user login. So if you wanted to run it for everything and then sort it by user, you could, or you could run it for everything and sort it by item. So I believe that that will answer their question on where that change report is located, and it's called the Inventory Audit Report.
Okay, thank you. If that did not answer the question, please rephrase the question and we'll address it again. One more question. Is there a report available that shows aged inventory?
Aged inventory? I'm not sure if I understand the question, if it's wanting to determine maybe how long something has been on the shelf.
That is how I read that question.
Okay. There is the inventory turnover report may provide them with that information. Now, I'm going to, bear with me, I'm just going to do the standard report with just some generic information. So this may help them with, it gives the quantity on hand year to date, what your average inventory is, what's been sold to date, the number of turns, and the annual number of turns. If that doesn't answer their question, have them phrase it with a little more detail, and then we'll see if we can get to that later in the presentation.
That's all the questions for now.
Okay, thank you. All right. So again, the product line maintenance is very, very important, and in getting, and you have to set up your product lines, and they have to be in place before you can set up your inventory items. So we're also going to look at the warehouse code maintenance. And as you remember, I mentioned to you that you can have multiple warehouses set up in your system. So you can see in my demo data, I have several warehouses set up. You can list the address of the warehouse, especially if you're using those various warehouses as maybe a ship to address. When you're ordering something through PO, you want it shipped to warehouse 1 or you want it shipped to warehouse 2. And then also when you're selling things, you're going to want to make sure that you know what warehouse you're selling it out of. see if I can find one with a little information. Okay, we'll go back here. So most of this information is optional, but I think it would be helpful to, have the name and address of the warehouse listed with the warehouse code, and also a decent description so that it's easy for your staff to determine, warehouse 000 is, the Louisville warehouse, and warehouse 001 is the Lexington warehouse. Now you'll notice that I cannot delete this warehouse 000. This is the default warehouse, and so I'm not able to delete it. If I go to other warehouses that I've set up, I do have the ability to use the delete function, but on 000 it will not let you do that because if you're using inventory and have inventory items, you have to have at least one warehouse set up, and that's what it's assuming that 000 will be. One of the new things that they've added is this warehouse status. And now you can actually make a warehouse inactive. However, you'll notice when I tried to make this inactive, it says it cannot be changed. And I can click details to see why it can't be changed. And the reason it can't be changed is because this warehouse is full of items. So once those items are removed from the warehouse or those items are inactive, then I could inactivate my warehouse. And then restricted allows you to restrict what can be done within that warehouse. So you'll see the various things that you can allow if your warehouse is restricted. So I just wanted to point that out to everyone, and that's where the warehouse codes are set up and maintained. And then I wanted to briefly mention to you the warranty code maintenance. And we mentioned, I showed you in the setup where you could tell it that you wanted to track warranty codes. This is basically where they're set up. And you give it a code, which is user defined, and then you also will give it a description, and then the number of days that something is under warranty. And then when you set up if you're tracking warranty codes, when you set up an item, you can give it the applicable warranty code, and then again, you can create reports. I don't, to the best of my knowledge, there is not a standard report that pulls just based on warranties, but you can, using Crystal Reports, create a custom report to pull that information if you need it. So that's what we were going to cover within the setup of the inventory management module. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move to inventory maintenance. So are there any questions right now, Jody?
No, there's one that I think we'll address at the end if you don't cover it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're going into, I said inventory maintenance is actually called item maintenance. And this is where you're going to set up your individual items. And I'm just going to grab the first one here and just go through some of the information. Now, in trying not to jump around too much, I do want to show you a couple of things in the very beginning. Is that when I have my item code, right here is a little flashlight, which is grayed out. If that flashlight looks like a flashlight and the little light part is yellow, that indicates that there are alias items that are set up in the system. So let me see if I can just find one here. I had some earlier, but obviously not now. So what we're going to do is, what I'm going to do, hold on, bear with me just a second here. Let's go back to the very first item. What alias items are, and I'm going to click on more and I'm going to click on alias over here, is that I can create an alias item and associate it with my inventory item. So when I say the type, I have general, I have customer, or I have vendor. So let's say that you sell a product called 1001-HON-H252, but when you buy that from your vendor, their item number is 55566. So when you're ordering it from them, you want to use that alias item number as well on your PO that you're issuing to them. And let's say that I order it from Airway Properties, and I can accept that. And then I could also set up another alias item if I purchase this from another vendor, and then I could select that vendor as well. So you can have multiple aliases per item. And if I do a lookup, I can see all of the various ones that have been set up in my system in general, whether it's assigned to a vendor, or you can also assign it to a customer. If your customer wants you to use their item number or a different number, you can do that as well, or you can just set up something as a general alias item. So your items, your inventory item can have multiple alias item numbers associated with it. And then also with the description, we have this little icon here that says extended item description. So if the description of your item requires a lengthier description than what you can fill in this space, then you can continue in this item text maintenance and continue with longer or extended descriptions. Now, typically, so let's say that on your sales order form or your sales order invoice or your purchase order form, you want to make sure that when you're pulling in this item code and it pulls in the description, if you want to show those extended descriptions, that you have the form set up to pull in that extended description information, and so that it's set up that the field can grow and so forth. But you do have the ability to set up those extended descriptions. Product line. This is where you're actually pulling in that product line, and if I do a lookup, we're going to see those product lines that were listed a few minutes ago. So this is where you're going to select the product line, and if you notice, the valuation method is grayed out. So it's pulling the valuation method from the product line. Okay. And then kind of at a glance, you're able to see, the retail price of the item, the standard price, the last time you sold the item. On the purchases side, if you use the purchase order module, the standard cost, average cost, the last time you received it in, and then also the last cost. And then at the bottom here with my quantities, this is where you can see each of my individual warehouses. You can see the description. I can I can expand those fields. And I can see that on this item in the central warehouse, I have 2677 on hand, and I currently have 10 of those on purchase order. If I have sold some but not shipped them, it's going to list here that these are on sales order. It will show me any that I have on back order and also any that happen to be committed, and then what's available. And then if I'm using the shipping feature, it's also going to let me know what I have in shipping. So it kind of shows you then this will calculate your on hand less your ship. So in some of the older versions, you do not have all of these columns. A lot of times what you have is you have on hand, on sales order, on purchase order, and on back order, and the quantity available, and it doesn't include the rest of this information. So if you look at your screen on your Sage 100 and you're not seeing all of the same columns, it could be because you're on an older version and that once you upgrade, then you'll be able to see these additional columns. And also you can see the last time you actually did a physical count. And we're going to talk a little bit about physical counts today as well, because we get a lot of questions about physical count, and a lot of times the questions come in after, they should have been asked before they started the physical count versus after they're already in the physical count, and then it can cause you extra work. So just wanted to kind of briefly show you what that inventory maintenance looks like. You can go to the History tab and kind of get a view of how many you've sold, how many received, issued, transferred, adjusted. These are all inventory transactions that we'll talk about in a minute. And then also you can take a look at it by your inventory year, whether that be a calendar year or a fiscal year. And you can look at quantities, you can look at the sales only, you can look at receipts only, and then you'll notice here you can look at a particular warehouse or you can look at all warehouses. So the transactions are basically going to give you by warehouse or for all warehouses. It's going to show you all of the transactions that have taken place. This would indicate that this was a receipt of goods. If something starts with an I, it's a transaction that happened within inventory. If you look over here to the left, you have your inventory transactions. So that would indicate that as well. If you have sold something through sales order, that would be indicated as a transaction that was generated through the SO module. So with that, and kind of tying into these inventory transactions, I want to talk just a little bit about the integration with inventory, or excuse me, the integration with sales order and purchase order. So the main reason that clients have the sales order module is that in order to sell something to your customer and to actually have it pull a true inventory item and track that inventory, you do that through the sales order module versus accounts receivable. Accounts receivable for clients that don't physically have warehouses, where they maybe just have miscellaneous items or miscellaneous charges, they can do their billing and everything directly through accounts receivable because there's no integration with inventory. But if you are selling an item and you want to do an invoice out of Sage and have it pull that item out of inventory, then you're going to be doing that through the sales order module. And that's under most circumstances, probably 99.9% of the time. When clients use the purchase order module, they use that with inventory so that when they order something from their vendor and they issue a PO, they do a receipt of goods when that merchandise comes in, and that receipt of goods then in turn puts that item into inventory. Okay? So your sales order, your sales are taking it out of inventory, and your purchasing and your receipts are bringing it into your inventory. If any of you do drop ships, and you're using the sales order module and the purchase order module, it's important that on the sales order side and the PO side, you are indicating that the item is being drop shipped. Because Sage 100 assumes when it sees that you, for instance, a sales order, if you do a sales order and you say the item is being drop shipped, it assumes that that item is never going to come out of your inventory because it's going to be sent from your supplier directly to your customer. So there's nothing coming into your inventory. When you do a purchase order for something that's being drop shipped, it also assumes that it's bypassing your inventory and is going to go directly somewhere else. So if you have an item that's drop shipped and you're using purchase order and sales order, if they're not both listed as drop ships, then, for instance, your sales order says drop ship, but your PO doesn't, then that purchase order is going to be received in. That item is going to go into your inventory, but because the sales order is listed as a drop ship, it's never going to come out of your inventory. So it's going to skew your quantity on hand. So hopefully that's kind of hard to explain without going into each of the individual modules and showing you the actual transactions, but hopefully that'll be enough information to just remember that if you do drop ships, it's imperative that it be handled the same way consistently in the sales order or the purchase order module. So, and then how that ties into the transaction entry, there are some individuals that choose to maybe not have the purchase order module. They're going to use sales order and have their items come out of inventory when they sell it, but they have a manual PO system. They just, cut POs, handwrite them, but when merchandise comes in, somehow that has to be reflected into your inventory management. So you would do a transaction entry within inventory, and here are the different things I can do. I could do a sale, I can do an issue. A transfer would be transferring product from one warehouse to another. I could do an adjustment if I needed to fix something, or in my instance, I don't have the PO module, I could do a receipt and then actually receive that merchandise in so that it comes into my inventory. So that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. Are there any questions, Jody, that people have about how inventory and inventory and purchase order and sales order work together, or anything that I mentioned about drop ships or those transactions?
No questions on that.
Okay, thank you. And you could actually, do everything manually through the transaction entry to bring things into inventory or to sell things out of inventory, but it's not going to, if you do a transaction entry that says it's a sale, it's not going to have any effect on your accounts receivable. So it's not going to post a sale to a customer. This is more of kind of a generic type situation. So the last thing that I want to talk about, because there may be some questions on this, is the physical count entry. So we're going to spend a few minutes talking about physical count. A lot of people just do their physical count at the end of the year. And a lot of times we see it happen maybe like between Christmas and New Year's or something like that. They'll do a physical count so they have a good count starting on January 1. If you have the scenario where you're going to do a count at the end of the year, you have a fairly extensive inventory, you have multiple warehouses possibly, and you've never performed a count with Sage before, what I would suggest that you do is get in touch with our support team. Give them a heads up so they can provide you with some things to do or not to do in the beginning. And even if it's going to be something that's real critical and you can't have a delay if you run into an issue, let somebody know, can you be available on the 30th at 3 o'clock, because that should be when we're updating our inventory and I want to make sure that someone's available. But anyway, on the physical count, there's a couple of things that you will want to do before you get to the point of printing a physical count worksheet, because the system will actually let you print out a worksheet that you can give to your staff members. They can go out and do the count, bring those sheets back, and then you actually go in and do the physical count entry based on the numbers that they're giving you. So the first thing you want to do before you start any inventory is just make sure that you've completed any transactions that will affect your on-hand quantities. So let's say that you've done invoices today and you just haven't had a chance to update them. Go ahead and update those in the system, and don't have any open transactions before you actually start your physical count. So if you've done a receipt of goods, go ahead and get that posted first. Invoices, get those posted first. If you do inventory transaction entry and you're doing adjustments, you're transferring items between warehouses, go ahead and make sure that all of those items those transactions are posted. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go into your physical count worksheet. So when I go into the physical count worksheet, the main thing that you need to do before you start your inventory is you need to freeze your items. Now, a lot of people think once you freeze your inventory, it means that you can't do any transactions at all in your Sage until you've completed your inventory, which is not true. That's the reason why you want to freeze it, because it kind of freezes those numbers in place. But you can issue POs, you can issue sales orders, you can sell items, and once you've entered your physical count and updated it, then it takes all of those other transactions into account as well, so that you do have a good inventory number. So you have a couple of items. You can print your worksheets only, but at some point you do have to freeze your items. You can print the worksheet and freeze your items at the same time. You can only freeze your items, or you can clear frozen items. So I'm trying to think of, typically about once or twice a year, we'll have someone that's fairly new with inventory, and they accidentally update their entire inventory to quantities of 0. And so let me kind of step back a minute, and then we'll go through again the proper steps to do your inventory, and then what not to do so you don't get yourself into trouble. So number one, I've got all of my my inventory transactions posted. I would run my stock status report, or if I'm using a LIFO or FIFO valuation method, I would run the negative tier report, and I would address any negative balances that I have before I actually freeze my inventory. And then I would go in and typically probably do the print the worksheet and freeze my items. So I'm going to click that option, and I'm just going to click preview so that you can see what I get. And I'm going to basically get a physical count worksheet. And you can break this down and print it by warehouse. You could print it by, location. You could print it by certain items. However you choose to do it, you have several different sort items. But you're going to give this worksheet to someone in your warehouse. They're going to go to each of these items, and they're going to put in how many they count. You'll notice that some of these have lot numbers. If they count something that has a valuation of lot, it's going to want to know what lot numbers that they're counting. And the same would be, don't know if I have an example of it, but if we have a serialized item, it's also going to want to know, okay, here we go. It's also going to want to know what serial numbers. So this particular item, this is what I'm showing that I currently have on hand, are these serial numbers. So, you know, maybe this one actually is 0, but then maybe there's other items that are not listed on here, and they would need to list each of those serial numbers as well. So once I freeze and physically print this worksheet, then my inventory is frozen. So I'm going to exit out of here. My staff is going to go, they're going to do their count. My salespeople are going to continue to sell. My purchasing agents are going to continue purchasing. So your business does not have to come to a standstill as long as it's frozen, your inventory is frozen. And then as they bring those physical count worksheets back to me, I'm going to go into physical count entry, and I'm going to select the warehouse. Oops. And I'm going to go here. So I've selected the warehouse. I'm going to my lines, and these are all of the item numbers that are listed in my warehouse. And then I'm going to enter the quantity that was on that worksheet. So if someone went out and counted this and they actually 991, then that's the number that I'm going to key in here. If on this particular item my system shows there's 19 and they counted 19, you have to put 19 in. If you leave that at the 0 that it defaults to, when you update this, it is going to remove those 19 from your inventory. So there needs to be a correct number in each item. At this point, if I decided, well, I really don't have time to finish anything, I'm just going to go ahead and update this, then what would happen is it's going to change this to 991. This, there would be no net change. This third item, there would be no net change. Every item below this, if there's a quantity, whether it's positive or negative, it's going to change it to what it thinks the quantity counted is. So, and once you go through this entry and you do the update, there's no way to undo that. So we've had folks that didn't realize that piece and have accidentally updated their inventory where it shows all zeros, and they had a huge issue. So if you can't remember if you have frozen your inventory, maybe a couple of days have passed and you just can't remember, you can always go back to your physical count worksheet as long as no one has started keying in numbers, and you could clear it, and then you can go right back in. And if you already have your worksheets printed, you can just do freeze items only, and it will freeze them again. You don't have to physically print those worksheets again. But you do want to make sure that you're really careful in those items, in that area. And after you do your physical count, so I'm going to go in and just do one real quick. And I'm going to do it incorrectly, but just for the purposes of today, I'm just going to change this first item. I'm going to click accept. So if I think I'm finished, my next step is to print the physical count variance register. And I'll give it a date that is reflective of my demo data. And I'm going to proceed. So what it's doing is it's going to show me all of my items, what it thought the quantity on hand was, what my count was, and then whether I was over or short, and then my variance. So see all of these that I didn't put a quantity in? It shows the quantity counted as 0, so it's actually going to remove them from my inventory. So if I go down to the bottom of this report, it's going to show me that my general ledger, my inventory, is going to take a $17,000 hit. So at this point, I'm reviewing the information, and if I realize that I've made that huge mistake, I'm going to close out of this report. When it says, do I want to update it, I'm going to say no. I'm going to go back to my physical count entry. I'm going to go back and pull that warehouse up, go to lines, and then I'm going to go in and make my entries. So as long as I don't update, I'm safe. If I had said yes to update that, it's basically going to wipe out most of my inventory, change those quantities to zero. It's going to impact my general ledger. And the only way to get that back is I'm going to have to do another entry and put all of those back in. So if you have 10 inventory items, it's not that big of a deal. If you have 5,000 inventory items, it can be a huge deal. So Jody, I'm going to open it up to see if anyone has any questions on physical counts or physical inventory.
Yes. Can inventory be frozen and counted by product line?
I'm sorry, can inventory be frozen in what, please?
Counted by product line.
I believe that it can be, but bear with me just a second. Right, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just clear the frozen items so that I'm starting from scratch. And I can say print worksheet and freeze items for the product line that would be equal to clicked on the wrong thing. So yes, you can do it based on product line.
Okay, one more question. Looking for a report that tells when customer inventory is more than 6 months old. For instance, we purchase and hold inventory and release over a period of time.
So you purchase, so your client, let's say, is going to order over a year, 1,000 widgets. So you commit those 1,000 widgets to the customer, but maybe you just send out so much per month or something of that nature. Can you ask them if that's, can you reply to Jody and let her know if that's a correct understanding?
Correct.
Okay. I'm not sure that there's anything in inventory, but if you're doing a situation like that with a client where they're going to order, again, 1,000 widgets, and then you're going to, they've committed to you that I'm going to buy 1,000 widgets if you'll sell them to me for $1 a piece, and then I'll let you know each month whether I want 1,000 or I want 50 or whatever, a situation like that. If you're using master orders within the sales order module, you can track there how many were on the master order and how many have been shipped and remain to be shipped. It's not going to break it down to say you're going to ship them, it would know that they ordered 1,000 and so far you've shipped 600 and there's 400 left to be shipped. A master order would track that. If it's something where they order 1,000 widgets every month, period, then you could do repeating orders in sales order, and then each month turn that repeating order into a regular sales order invoice, and it would then sell them and ship them 1,000. So I'm not sure if that completely addresses the question. If it doesn't, my email address is pam@oasisky.com. And if you want to email me a little more detail, maybe we can narrow it down a little bit more. But using master orders or repeating orders in sales order, and you also have that functionality in purchase order, might possibly give you what you want. Are there any other questions, Jody?
No other questions at this time.
Okay. Well, since we're just about out of time and have used our hour, like I said, there's so many things that you could talk about with inventory, but I tried to, as we're getting closer to year end, kind of focus on some of the things that you might be dealing with within the next couple of months. Just remember to prepare well. If you think you're going to need assistance, or it's going to be the first time that you've performed an inventory in Sage, let us know in advance so that we can set up some time to work with you and make sure that you all have a good understanding of what needs to be done for that physical count. Also, keep in mind holiday closings and that type of thing when you're preparing for your physical inventory. And we will have one more webinar next month. You'll be receiving information about it. I think it's on the Business Insights Reporter, possibly. And then our next round of webinars will be in early December, where we will be focusing on W-2 printing and 1099 printing and the Affordable Care Act. And then we'll get back into our more of a routine on the standard modules within Sage, picking back up in February or March of 2019. So that will be our schedule through the rest of the year. So if there are no additional questions, Jody, you can let me know. And if not, we will go ahead and end our session today.
Great. There are no additional questions. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. If you do have questions regarding inventory, feel free to reach out to pam@oasisky.com, or you may contact our help desk at 502-429-6902, extension 227. And we can address those questions through a support ticket if you have particular things that you need assistance with. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.